like Guy said, my name's John Niemeyer. I farm just south of Lincoln down here, about 30 miles away. I've been using the Exactrix system now for about 10 years. I think I started in about 06 or 07, somewhere in there. Started with the Bourgeau fertilizer openers, and I just, they were about 6-7 years old, so I decided to upgrade. Guy had the Mustangs out here this year, so we went ahead and tried them. And you can kind of see what I got. We have, it's a 30-foot toolbar, 1,000-gallon tank on it. So we got a pointer on this thing. This is my old 2KC. That's the original unit that I bought way back in 06. And it served me well. I haven't really had to do hardly any work to that part of it. We're on 15-inch centers. And if you guys do decide to go with a case bar, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you put a fertilizer tank on there, you're going to want to beef up the suspension. They have a heavier duty suspension available, or spindles available to handle that extra weight, because you're putting a lot of weight out there. So, but anyway, moving on. If I can figure this thing out. It's on the side.
I think that bar cost about $38,000.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you had to add the wheels.
Yep.
And the cylinder, didn't you need to put a bigger wing cylinder on?
We did. We put a. Let's see if I'll kind of go back here if it'll listen to me.
And John, you did a lot of the ag leader with a local, wasn't McKinsey dealer that helped you?
Yeah. I seem to be going the wrong direction here. Let's go one more here. There we go. All right. Yeah, the cylinders on the right here, these wing cylinders, Case does make a heavier duty cylinder for the machine too. I got a ton of, not a ton of weight, but about 400 pounds of weight out here on the wings for down pressure. I felt we weren't getting quite the penetration on the outside reel units that I liked. So we put a little weight on there, and then of course you put more weight on there, and then the cylinders run out of, they can't lift all the weight. So we upgraded the cylinders, and it was $500 for the cylinders, so it's pretty minimal. But it worked good. I've got some video footage of it. I couldn't get it to work in my PowerPoint today, so if you want to see it later, I can bring out the laptop and show you kind of how it runs and what it looks like in the field. So I farm about 2,000 acres. I'm about 80% continuous corn. Later on in the presentation, you'll begin to understand why I'm 80% corn. I also happen to be a certified crop advisor, and I use my Ag Leader software and hardware for all my variable rate applications, whether that be phosphorus, lime, anhydrous ammonia, you name it. We pretty much do all our technology items in-house. I work sampling, or I write my own prescriptions. So very minimal outside influence in what I'm doing. That's my bunch. I got one that graduated here last year and another one in another year. So I guess I'm going to be right in the middle of college here pretty soon. Maybe that 100,000 that Tina Barrett was talking about is closer to reality than I like to think. As I mentioned earlier, we've got, I do about, I'm about 80% continuous corn, and I've really had pretty good luck with that. On the occasion, I'll run into an issue, and this year was no exception. I ran into some residue problems, but we'll talk about that later on too. Some of my irrigated acres have been continuous corn for about 8 years, and the key for me to managing any of my residue is to work with the local cattle producers, and all my irrigated acres are grazed pretty heavily in the fall, and that seems to do a pretty good job. I've gotten by fairly well with managing the residue that way. So that's a pretty key component of my attempt at continuous corn. We do all spring applied anhydrous ammonia and tap. Most of the time my irrigated yields are in that 190 to 220 range. And for Gage County, that's a pretty good number. We have a lot of rolling farms. Very few of my acres are level. They're all farms with anywhere from 5 to 8% slopes. So, you know, a lot of clay, a lot of eroded hillsides, and so I think that 190 to 220 is a pretty good number for our area. So on the irrigated side, typically I'll put down usually about 140 to 160 pounds of nitrogen in the spring, and that doesn't include any contribution from the taps at all. That's just straight ammonia. So total nitrogen applied is usually about 160 or so. That's kind of where I'm at. So moving on here to 2014. I don't know about any of you guys, but we have a lot of hail in our area. Anybody else in this? Yeah. Weber's back there. We ended up having a lot of hail this year, and really reduced a lot of my stands on my irrigated side and dryland both. My yields on my irrigated actually, I think, suffered a little bit more. I think I was probably had a little more disease in there, and my stand loss was fairly significant. And then we had some denitrification in June, which I hadn't really expected or experienced before in previous years. And one of the fields I had trouble with, I had Jim come out and take a look at, where we had some severe issues, and I learned a lot off of that interaction. So overall it was a good crop, but it wasn't a great crop for me. Here's a picture of my my residue management issue. And we got I talked a little bit earlier, and we've got kind of this wavy effect here, and you can see the taller corn on the outside and the shorter corn in the middle, and well, bottom line is it was I believe it to be a residue management issue caused by my combine, and I didn't have the chopper on the high side on the previous year's corn stubble, and resulted in some loss of nitrogen in those areas where we had excessive residue. So Jim can probably explain that a lot better than I can, but it was a learning experience. So don't do that.
There's 70 bushel yield swing between.
There was, yeah, absolutely. We when I was running through the field with the combine, I just decided to take the outside 4 rows and just to see what the yield was on those 4, and the outside rows were, you know, 215, 220, and then the interiors were a lot less. So I've gotten verifiable proof of that. So now we've been hammering this all day long about Exactrix economics, and I've got a few slides going forward here that's kind of show you what I've been doing the last few years, and you know, I've experimented, and you know, over time I've kind of nailed it down to about 3/4 pound of nitrogen per bushel of yield. That's kind of what my rule of thumb has been, or how it's working out. And when, you know, in a dryland situation, most generally I'm running about, you know, 100 to 120 pounds of nitrogen, and my yields, that's usually enough nitrogen out there for about 160 to 170 pounds of, or 170 bushel of corn. So some of the things I've noticed, one thing that, whoops, wrong button. One of the things I've noticed is we do our own liming, and typically about every 4 years I've got to go back out and apply about 2 ton of lime to 2.5 ton of lime, because my pHs have went from, you know, 6.5 down to 5.8, and that was my routine before the Exactrix system. And you know, now I'll go out there and grid sample them, and you know, my pHs after that same period of time, 4 or 5 years, they're still in the middle 6s. So What's the rule of thumb? For every pound of nitrogen out there, you're burning up 2 pounds of calcium. So obviously we're leaving less hydrogen out there, and keeping our pHs, which is a cost saving over time. Typically, I've been running about half the rate that I was prior with P. Instead of running 15 gallon of 1034 out there pre-plant, I'm able to get by with usually 7 to 10 now. So, and my P1 levels have not declined at all. In fact, I'm maintaining levels, and in some cases actually going up. So working pretty well. This is just a little slide I put together on some of my dryland fields this year, and all I'm trying to do, we were talking about nitrogen efficiency earlier today from one of the gentlemen, and how to compute that. Well, essentially this is the same idea, only with corn, and I keep track on a field by field basis total pounds of nitrogen I apply, just for accounting reasons, to allocate my costs. And I was kind of surprised at this one right here. This particular farm yielded 142, which doesn't sound all good. But the thing that amazes me is that I only put 100 pounds of nitrogen on that farm this year, just because in the past it just hasn't yielded very well. It's in a low rainfall area, and I don't care. I farmed it for 6 years, and I have yet to raise a corn crop over 130 bushels. So, at 0.56 pounds of nitrogen per bushel, we raised 142 bushel of yield. I have to say the corn didn't look all that impressive from the air. Late season, it looked like it ran out of gas, that is for sure. And I think it did. When you look at some of the other yields, we were probably about 20 pounds short. But my economics are probably pretty good on that farm. And then the rest are pretty consistent, but 0.74, 0.8, 0.79, about 3/4 of a pound, that's where I'm at. Now I work with Nebraska Farm Business. They do my accounting for my tax planning for me. But I work with another outfit out of Brighton, Illinois called Agri Solutions, and that's I use their software and their accounting software. And so the primary reason I use them is they allow me to do some benchmarking, and with the benchmarking, I'm able to compare my costs across farms across the country, all the way from North Dakota to South, or way down into Texas, Illinois, Indiana, when I do the benchmarking, there's a line item in there for all your major inputs: your seed, chemical, fertilizer, your general crop, general administrative, equipment, all those. And what I've found every year since I've been doing the benchmarking is that I am significantly under the average for fertilizer cost. And I do apply a lot of lime, so I think these first two numbers are skewed a little bit just because the lime is included in there. And I don't have the 14 results yet, but this is my number for this year. I'm at $102 an acre. So I don't know how that compares with the rest of you guys, but from what I saw earlier in a couple other presentations, it looks like, typical farm is, or from Tina, I think she had 150 to 170 acres in there for nutrient costs. So, I think I'm probably at least $30 to $40 an acre less than most producers right now. So,
Is that dry?
this is dry. No, this is over all acres. This would be over all acres. Yeah, yeah. I should have clarified that just a little bit more, but that's consistently been where it's been the last few years. So, this farm here is a dryland farm. It was previously soybeans the year before. We put on the target rate was about 100 pounds of nitrogen. We, as you can see, the darker green strips in here, I believe that is over application error there by my operator. So we ended up, average was 121 pounds per acre. This is my prescription-based fertilizer map here. And the red zones, obviously, we're backing that down to under 100 pounds to the acre. And the darker green is the most productive parts of the farm, so we have more fertilizer on those areas. So this is just kind of the medium one. So on this field, really steep slope right here. This is probably 0 to 2% slope in this area, and then over here it's probably 8 to 10%. So typically this area doesn't produce very well, and we've got the zones here, the red zones, which over time have shown me that they don't produce as much, so I haven't been applying as much fertilizer there. So, and then we come back with the yield map, and when I look at this, I think that my prescription probably isn't just too far off. We got the red areas around the outside. We got some red areas in here. I think there's probably a fairly close correlation. This area here intrigues me a little bit because it's dark green, and typically it doesn't produce that well in that area. So I got to do a little more investigating. But I think the prescription overall fit the field, and it's a second here. This is a different farm. Jim, this is about a half mile east of where we were this summer. So it's the bottom ground. Part of it's bottom ground, real dark black stuff, black dirt. And then up here, this is the upland stuff. This is where we got some tougher hillsides up here. The good black dirt's over here. This is the hillside where it all runs off. And then this is where the bottom ground is. So we got... we ended up with 0.79 pounds per bushel of yield on this one. Typically, overall, this farm, because of the bottom ground and the good soil types, when you look at overall yield, for me, it's one of my top producing farms. So, and so here we go. We got, we got your highly productive bottom ground here, 108 doing 130, 150. So once again, the prescriptions fairly reflect the yield. So this particular patch here historically has been where I put my national corn growers plot. So that area has a pretty darn good fertility there. So that's why we have a higher yield on that one. So anyway, we're going to move on to 15 cost comparisons, and what I've done here is I've input some numbers typical for my operation, and I've used some of a lot of the information from AgriSolutions about costs and what is normal and what is customary, and I've come up with some ideas here. And the first thing you're going to look at is 475. How in the hell are we going to get to 475 this year? Well, I'll talk about that in just a little bit. The thing that I look at anyway is the bottom line here. And when you add up all these costs, and these are relative more to maybe some of yours, but we're looking at, I got a potential of at least making some money on dryland corn this year. Soybeans, I can't see it, and I don't even have any fertilizer in there. All I've got in there is $4 an acre, and that's just because I got some lime I got to put on a few acres. But I have a hard time coming up with a positive number with a normal yield. And normal, I mean about middle of the road, 45 for me, and for corn, 150. So. I don't know what anybody else's experience has been, but that's kind of what profitability in 15. I think is going to be three things: cost control, and that's going to be your seeds and your rents, your fertilizers, and your equipment. I don't know if you can do much about seed. It seems to me that companies are pretty stuck on their price, and it's hard to get them to budge. If they don't get you in one area, they'll get you in the other. So. Rents, maybe that's the negotiable point. Fertilizer for me is where it's at. You know, I've got about a $40 or $50 advantage right now, and in the equipment, you know, there's always room for improvement there, whether that be reducing the number of tractors you have, or selling a piece of equipment, or upgrading a piece of equipment if you need to. Marketing is going to be another critical part. I think that you know, you're going to farmers going to have to really focus this year on their marketing program, and when they see an opportunity to lock in some profitable prices, you're going to have to jump on it. When we're talking about marketing and how I use 475 on my cash flow there, if you look out to July 16 right now, July of 16 corn futures are trading at 442 as of today. So that's only about we're about 30 cents away from my target of 475. And I don't know, a lot of you guys have bases that are in the Dakotas, I know, that are horrendous right now. $1 under, maybe $2 under in some cases. But you know, I think basis is the other opportunity you guys are going to have to look at. And I'll give you a perfect example this year. We have a ethanol plant in the area that middle of November posted a bid of 0 basis. So instead of delivering to your local elevator, you know, I was able to gain an additional 40 cents just by delivering to the ethanol plant, only it was about 50 miles away. So you might need a truck. You're going to have to travel a little bit, but I think there'll be some good opportunities for basis later on. All right, well, that's all I got. I always like to end the show with, you know, I've been known to make a few mistakes in my day, and this is no exception, but this little event here was a rather expensive one for me. Actually, my dad made the mistake of putting dirt in my live bottom trailer, and well, he broke the chain with 25 ton of dirt on it, and well, long story short, that was one of the attempts that we made to try and get that dirt out without scooping it. This one here worked. Whoops. This one here worked the best with the little excavator in the back. That was the most effective, and thankfully it did work, because I really didn't want to scoop that off. But you can kind of see that was quite an event. But anyway, I like to poke fun at myself once in a while. I make mistakes all the time, and like it says, another expensive education. So every education we receive out here usually has a price, and let's hope that we can escape those expensive ones this year. So
Most of this data was dryland corn.
it was, yes.
And there was a lot of hail damage on the irrigated.
Yes.
And,
Yep.
that sort of thing.
Yep.
So,
My irrigated yields were a little disappointing for me this year, so that's why I stuck with the dryland. So, any questions, you guys? I'd be happy to answer if you got any. I don't.
yeah,
Yep.
Your rates on the liquid side was running through your 2 kp. What are you using?
For rates?
Yeah, and
Yep.
also do you use starters for?
I do. I use starter with the planter. I'll put you know, maybe 5 gallon 1034-0 or a mixture of 1034-0 and 32 in furrow, and then I also for my rates on my typically on my dryland corn, I'll run anywhere from usually 10 to 15 gallon taps, and then on the irrigated I'll go maybe 20 to 30 if it's you know, if I'm pushing yield.
What, 1034 and about
Yeah,
salt?
yeah, yeah.
What ratio do you use?
Usually 50-50. Yeah. Yep. So.
And this is your first year of true variable rate across the land?
Oh no, we've been variable rating. Anhydrous and the taps for, I'm guessing probably 3 to 5 years now. So.
And are you using yield maps and Veris maps or sat shots? Or?
Well, I've been using yield maps for the most part. I'll do some analysis through my software, and we'll compare multiple years of yield data, and then identify those lower yielding zones and fertilize accordingly. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And phosphate, I remember looking at it up there. Let's see, Kevin, your irrigator production was really good this year. It was right up there.
It's pretty decent. Not quite as good as the year before.
Not quite as good as the year before, though.
Yeah.
And so when I first met Kevin, he was in the 200, 220 range about 7, 8 years ago. And we just did single product the first time, didn't we?
I think we did.
Just did ammonia. And then each year you kind of stepped into it and kept hitting home runs, so you kept sticking with it. And he's worked it up now with rotational band loading and you know, a nice controlled traffic system you have on the ridges. And that phosphate efficiency is really up. I've seen your yield maps. They're so uniform across the field.
We're blessed with some really good soil.
I think so.
We got it easy.
Yeah. Yeah, the tough part is when you got a lot of variability out there, so.
So, okay, well, I think, John, we certainly appreciate
Yep.
giving us some light in the tunnel here.
Yeah, I'm fairly optimistic for this year. I think that, you know, there's going to be a chance for a good price, a profitable price. And if you have your costs in line and you know what your cost of production is, I think there'll be opportunities ahead, so.
You bet. That's the only way to look at it.
Yep.
You know, it's just, we're not going the other way. We're
No.
definitely going ahead.
That's right,
So,
that's right.
we wouldn't have got here any other way. Kind of like riding the Conestoga wagon across the Nebraska headed for Oregon. There's got to be something better out there.
Yeah.
Well, we sure appreciate it, John. You've been fantastic for Exactrix.